That man in the picture there, I'd never seen him before in my life. I walked up to him on a busy street. I introduced myself. I told him that he had an extraordinary face. And 10 minutes later, I had one of my favourite portraits of all time. Now, he was a complete stranger. And he's now, in a very real sense, immortal. That is street portraiture. And today, we're going to talk about exactly how you do it. Now, before we get into this, and I want to say this right away, Nina and I haven't left yet. The house is still in the market and the motorhome is still to be found. But while we're in this wonderful, slightly frustrating waiting period, I want to give you everything I know about street photography so that when we do finally hit the road, you'll be ready to come along with us properly. Now, today's the big one, street portraiture. Hang around till the end, if you will, please, for 10 top tips on shooting street portraits. Let's go. What makes street portraiture different? Well, if you've been following this series from the beginning, you'll know that we've already covered shooting from the hip street photography. And this style of shooting is all about watching, waiting, and capturing the world as it unfolds around you. Yeah, so in the last video that was that. In the first video we had an overview of the 3 types of street photography that I undertake, called street level observations. And shooting from the hip, the subject doesn't know you're there. Street portraiture is completely different. In street portraiture, you walk up to a complete stranger, someone you've never met, someone who has got absolutely no reason to give you any time of day, and you ask them face to face if you can take their photograph. Now, I know that you're thinking, because every photographer I've ever talked to has the same thought: I could never do that. And I'm here to tell you that yes, you absolutely can do that. And by the end of this video, I hope that you'll know exactly how to. The other thing I want to say before we go any further with this is street portraiture is not just a photographic technique. It's a way of communicating with human beings in a way that very few other activities allow. You are approaching a stranger with nothing but genuine interest and admiration for who they are and how they look, and it has to be genuine. And the response that you get more often than not, surprisingly, is extraordinarily warm. People want to be seen. They want to be told that they're interesting. They want someone to look at them and say, you matter. You're worth photographing. You're worth remembering. And that's what you're giving them when you ask that question. Now, I must say, at this point, that I would normally do these videos on location, on a street, actually getting my hands dirty on the job, showing you how I'm doing it. Now, that will come once the journey starts. I can't wait, right? But I've been in crutches for 6 months now with severe sciatica, and I can confirm that it is impossible to hold the camera and the crutch at the same time. Hence the reason that we're in my office. So, why bother with street photography? Well, before we get into the how, let me make the case for the why. This style of photography is worth the discomfort because, trust me, there will be discomfort. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. And even after years of doing this, there is still a moment of nerves, I think, before I approach somebody and ask them. But here's what street photography, I guess, gives you that no other style can. It gives you eye contact, and eye contact in a portrait changes everything. Because when you shoot from the hip, or you observe from a distance, you're capturing people who are unaware of you. Those images, they've got their own power, by the way, because I love shooting from the hip. They're authentic. They've got a fly-in-the-wall quality. They're cinematic. But the subject's eyes are somewhere else. They're in their own world. In a street portrait, the subject is looking directly at you, directly at the camera, directly, therefore, at the viewer of the image. And that connection, that direct, unblinking human connection across the frame is something that stops people in their tracks when they see it. Think about the great portrait photographers. Think about Steve McCarthy's Afghan Girl. Now, that image stopped the world because of one thing. those eyes looking straight into yours across a decade and a continent. Now, you don't have to be Steve McCurry, and you don't have to be in Afghanistan, right? You just need to be on a street in Seville or Naples or Krakow or your own local city street with a camera and the nerve to say hello to someone interesting. Now, these portraits are there, they're everywhere, they're just waiting for someone to ask, why not you? And I'll tell you something else. Nina and I are eventually travelling through Europe in the motorhome. God bless. Arriving slowly in new places, becoming part of the neighbourhood before we pick up the camera. The conditions for street portraiture are going to be absolutely ideal, because you approach people differently when you're not rushing, when you've got nowhere else to be, when you're genuinely curious about the place you're parked up in, rather than just ticking it off a tourist list, shall we say. That unhurried quality, I think that that's going to transform the portraits that we make when we're travelling. I genuinely can't wait to find out. So, who do we approach? How do we find our subjects? Yeah? How do we choose? Well, my honest answer is that I look for people who are visually extraordinary. People who are going to make more interesting pictures. People whose faces tell a story before they've even said a single word. Now, that's not to say that I won't photograph a man in a pinstripe suit or a woman on a shopping trip, right? But you kind of tend to gravitate towards the more outrageous, the more visually striking, the more interesting, shall we say. The ones who look like they've lived 1,000 lives and wouldn't mind telling you about them, right? The weathered fisherman whose hands look like they've been carved from the same wood as his boat. The market trader with a laugh that you can hear from the other end of the street. And the elderly woman sitting in a doorway who's clearly seen everything that this world has to offer and has her own very firm opinions about most of it. In Europe, specifically, I guess, and this is one of the things that I'm most excited about on this trip, the faces are extraordinary. You walk through a Portuguese fishing village and you see faces that Rembrandt would have wept to paint. You sit in a square in southern Italy and you watch old men playing a game and arguing with a passion and an expressiveness that's simply not part of the culture in Scotland. Now, it's no offence to Scotland. I've photographed some wonderful people in Scotland and I love Scotland, but we're not exactly known for our expressive faces. Now, these are the people that I want to find, and I've been lying awake at night thinking about them, if I'm honest. While we wait for the house sale to go through, I'm out there dreaming about a fisherman in the Algarve who I haven't even met yet. That's the power of street portraiture and how much I love my photography. It makes you hungry for the world, really. Let's talk about the camera, what to bring and why, right? Before we talk about the approach, let's talk a little bit about what you're going to have in your hand when you walk up to that stranger. Because the camera matters, not in the way that you might think. It's not about pixel counts or megapixels or anything like that. They don't matter. But in a way that how it affects your subject and how they feel about being photographed by you. And how you feel about doing the actual photography. For street photography, street portraiture, and my camera really is, well, any camera. Photographers worry too much about the kit for this particular style of street photography. I have shot everything from my iPhone to a Phase 1 medium format camera for street portraiture. It can be a small mirrorless or a DSLR. It honestly does not matter. What does matter is that you're 100% confident using it. No faffing about changing settings. You need to be quick and confident when using the cameras. I have friends who use 5.4 cameras with film on the street. That's a really interesting concept, that. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Take my little Fuji X Pro 1 that I use for shooting from the hip. It looks like a classic film camera, right? And it's got dials on the top for shutter speed and exposure compensation, just like cameras had 30 or 40 years ago. And when you pull it out in front of a stranger, particularly an older stranger, something interesting happens. They recognise it, or rather, they recognise the shape and the feel of it, even if they don't know what it actually is. It doesn't look like a weapon or a piece of surveillance equipment. It looks like exactly what it is, a photographer's camera. And that familiarity puts people at ease before you've even opened your mouth. And I pair that with a 35mm lens which it comes with, which gives me roughly a 50mm equivalent point of view. But that's not to stop you using a DSLR, a Canon 5D Mark IV there, or it's not to stop you using a film camera like a big medium format like this Mamiya RB67. Use what the hell you want. The good thing about the 35mm lens on this is that it gives you a kind of human point of view when you're looking through the camera, and it means that you're close enough to have a genuine conversation with your subject without you shouting across the street at them. The last thing you want, by the way, is a 200mm lens where you can't converse properly with your sitter. I tend to shoot aperture priority, usually somewhere 2.8 to 4. If I need to go to 8, I will. I don't worry too much about that. I want the subject to be sharp and the background to be soft enough to separate them clearly from whatever is behind them. Try and make it plain if possible. Adjust your ISO to suit so that you've got a kind of minimum shutter speed of 250th of a second. I don't want any motion blur on a face. And I always shoot RAW plus JPEG. The JPEG for instant review on the back of the camera. It's a crap screen by the way, but it does work. The RAW for control in post-production. Now here's the thing about street portraiture specifically. Unlike hip shooting, where a small camera is essential for discretion, here your subject knows you're photographing them. Discretion is less important than connection. So if you shoot, a Sony A7 series or a Nikon Z or a Canon R, any modern mirrorless system will work beautifully. The Fuji's my preference, but it's absolutely not the only answer. I will say it again, photography, either an Android or an iPhone, is perfectly acceptable as a street portrait camera. See these shots here taken with various iPhone models and apps. The best camera for street portraiture is the one you know so well, because you never have to think about it, because all your attention needs to be on the person in front of you and not on the settings in the camera. The approach, what do we actually say to them? Right, this is the bit that everybody wants to know. What you say when you approach them. And I've refined this over many years and many approaches. And I've settled on a formula that works for me. I'm going to give you it word for word, because I think having an actual script in your head, at least to begin with, makes an enormous difference. Here it is. Excuse me, my name's Kenny. I'm a street portrait photographer, and I just noticed you walking along and you look absolutely amazing. Would you allow me to take your portrait? I'll send you a digital copy of the image. You can give me your email address and I'll make sure that you get it. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's it. It's easy. Let me break it down why each element of that works. Excuse me. Well, you're being polite. You're not grabbing them or startling them. You're treating them with respect from the very first word. My name is Kenny. You're immediately a person, not a threat. You have a name. You're humanising yourself before you ask anything of them. I'm a street portrait photographer. You're legitimate. You have a title. You do this as a thing, not just randomly pointing cameras at strangers on a whim. You look absolutely incredible. Here's a key. You must mean it. Don't say this to someone you don't genuinely find interesting or visually compelling. People can instantly tell if you're not sincere, and insincerity kills the approach stone dead. But when you mean it, and you will mean it, because you've chosen this person specifically because something about them has caught your eye and interest, it lands beautifully. Everyone at every age responds to being told how they look. I don't care who you are. The offer of a digital copy, this is important. It transforms the exchange. You're not just taking something from them, you're giving something back. And it almost always seals the deal. Just practice this in front of a mirror. Say it out loud until it feels completely natural, because when you're standing in front of an interesting stranger on a street in Florence or Lisbon or your local high street, you don't want to be thinking about the words. You want to be thinking about the person. As a crutch to help you in this process, printing a simple business card with your website and email info is not a bad idea that can cut through any problems when you hand it over. Like the next section, by the way, which is this: handling rejection. Trust me, it's going to happen. Not often. Genuinely, if you approach people with warmth and confidence and sincerity, most people will say yes. You'll be surprised how many people say yes to you. I'm always surprised, by the way. Every time it happens, I go, my goodness, I've asked 20 people and 18 have said yes. It's incredible. But some people say no. And you need to be completely prepared for that rejection. And comfortable with it, by the way, because the fear of it will paralyse you before you even open your mouth to ask them. Here's how to handle a no. I say, no problem at all. Thank you for your time. And you really do look wonderful, by the way. And I walk away. That's it. No argument, no pleading, no lingering. Clean, warm, dignified exit. Two things will happen when you handle rejection that way. First, the person you've approached feels respected. You've asked, they've declined, you've accepted that gracefully. Yeah, that's the way to do it. Second, and perhaps more importantly, you feel fine. You haven't been humiliated. You haven't made a scene. You've simply had a brief, pleasant exchange with a total stranger and you've moved on. The fear of rejection is almost always worse than the rejection itself. I promise you that. And here's the other thing I'd say about these moments of hesitation when someone doesn't give you a flat no but seems uncertain. I'll sometimes say, look, let me show you some of my other portraits just to put your mind at ease, and show them a few images, either in the back of your camera that you've shot that day or on your website or stuff you've got on your telephone ready and handy. 9 times out of 10, when someone sees the quality of the work and understands what you're trying to create, that hesitation then disappears completely. So let's talk a little bit about the shoot itself, working with your subject. The first thing to say is, before we get into the nitty gritty, I almost always work in natural light. First of all, it's quicker, right? Finding an overhang with in some shades, or under a tree or in an archway or something like that. If you can do that, if possible, that's great. But it's not unusual and it's not unknown for me to take a portable flash unit with me. I'd say probably 80 to 90% is natural light. Also, I've got no rules about colour or black and white. Whatever suits the image better is my mantra. So now they've said yes. Now what? Work fast. This is absolutely critical. Your subject has agreed to stand still for you, which is wonderful. But remember, they've got places to be. They didn't plan their afternoon around being photographed by you. The unwritten contract to Street Portraiture is that you will be efficient, you will be respectful, and you will not waste their time. Now, I aim to get my shot in 2 to 3 minutes if I can. I've been there before when I've got on with people for 10 minutes and it's absolutely wonderful, but do it as quick as you possibly can. Right? With the Fuji and the 35mm that I mentioned earlier, I'm physically close to my subject. I'm close enough to have a real conversation, close enough that the lens gives a completely natural perspective without any distortion whatsoever. I'm not hiding behind a long telephoto lens with 20 metres away. I'm right there. I'm 2 or 3 feet from their face, talking to them while I shoot. And talking, by the way, is the key. You need to keep the conversation going throughout the shoot. Ask them about themselves. Ask them what they do for a living, where they're from, what brings them onto the street today. People relax more when they're talking, The self-consciousness that comes from having a camera pointed at their face dissolves when they're engaged in a genuine conversation about something that matters to them. Don't ask them to smile. Oh, please God, don't ask them to smile. Let that expression come naturally with the conversation. The images where your subject is, I guess, mid-sentence or reacting to something that you've said, either something humorous or something pithy, or they're lost for a moment in a memory that you've prompted. They're the images. That's what you want. You don't want smiling, right? That's where the magic lives. And when you get back to the motorhome, when we eventually have a motorhome to get back to, you sit down with those images on your laptop and you find the ones that stop you cold are never the smiley, kind of properly posed ones. They're always the ones where something real has happened between you and that person on the street. And that's the whole point. That's the entire thing. So I said at the beginning I was going to give you 10 things that you can take away from today and actually use the next time you're out on the street with a camera. So let's start off with the obvious one, which is number 1. Choose your subject carefully. Look for someone whose face genuinely stops you. If you're not truly interested in them, they'll know it. Authenticity begins before you open your mouth. Number 2, learn your formula and practice it out loud. Excuse me, my name's Kenny and I'm a street portrait photographer and you look absolutely incredible. Say it until it feels completely natural. You don't want to be finding the words when you're standing in front of someone interesting. Number 3, always offer something in return. The offer of a digital copy transforms the exchange from taking to giving. It changes everything about how people respond. Number 4, accept rejection gracefully and move on immediately. A warm smile, a genuine compliment, and a clean exit. No lingering, no pleading. The next portrait's just waiting round the corner for you. Number 5, use a camera your subject can relate to, something that looks like a photographer's camera. It puts people at ease before you've said a single word. 6, get close. Street portraiture is not a long lens discipline. Get in close, have a real conversation, and let the lens do what a standard focal length lens does best. See the world the way human eyes do. 7, keep talking throughout the shoot. Ask them about themselves, where they're from, what they do, what they think about the place you're both standing in. A talking subject is a relaxed subject. A relaxed subject gives you real expression. 8, never ask them to smile. Wait for the expression that comes naturally from the conversation. The best portraits are never posed. They're stolen from the gaps between the sentences. 9, work quickly and respectfully. 10 minutes maximum. These people have somewhere to be. Honour the unwritten contract, efficiency and respect in exchange for their time and their trust. And 10, don't forget to send the photograph. You promised them a copy, keep that promise. It builds trust in street photography as a practice, and it leaves that person with something that they'll treasure, and frankly, it's just the right thing to do. A wee bonus one, number 11, get a business card printed up. I think that's quite important. Now that's street portraiture, guys. Now go out there and ask somebody, because street portraiture is the most demanding style of street photography. It will push you outside your comfort zone in ways that shooting from the hip never will. But the portraits you bring home, the faces, the eyes, the stories, they will be unlike anything else in your photographic life, I guarantee it. Now in the next video in this series, I'm going to be tackling observational street photography, or as others like to call it, photography. I'm just looking for shapes, I'm looking for graphics, humour, colour, space, reflections, all that good stuff. So if you're following this series as someone interested in the motorhome adventure as much as the photography, thank you for sticking in with the technical content. I promise it's all building towards something. The house will sell, the motorhome will be found, and when it is, every single thing that we've talked about in this series, that is going to come alive in ways that I can't even fully imagine yet. My name's Kenny Martin. This is Places and Faces Europe. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'm going to see you on the next one. Now, go and talk to a stranger. Bye for now.